Test, test. I don't know.
It's lit.
No kidding.
Well,
The
that's the only
conflict
way
with
I.
us is having flown for 20 years, I've seen just about everything I want to see. And maybe even more.
Now it's her turn.
Not anymore. It's when I hit that mic. It's over.
Everybody just settle down, it's 9 o'clock. Good morning,
Whoa.
everyone. I'd like to call to order the budget workshop. All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Bill? Yes. Okay. Call to order the budget workshop for the Charlotte County Airport Authority for fiscal year 2023, 2024. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance? All.
Everybody join me for pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. My TV's not working. That's all right. I'll just use the paper.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. Andrews?
Here.
Mrs. Oliver? Here. Mr. Carr?
Present.
Mr. Hansick?
Here.
Mr. Parrish?
Here.
Mrs. Coppola?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to acknowledge City Councilman Bill Dryberg, and he's brought a guest with him, which is Debbie Lux, who's running for City Council for the City of Punta Gorda. Welcome. Citizens input. Anybody want to talk to our budget at this point in time? I'm sure you all had an opportunity to review it over the last week at home in the bathroom. No one coming forward, so we can go ahead. Mr. Parrish.
Good morning, everybody. So we are, all right, Kaylee's budget doesn't get cut. She made it just in time.
Okay, I'll put it there.
So we're going to go through the graphs and the preliminary budget, the proposed 2024 budget. Just give you a little overview of our forecast for 2023 and then our proposed 2024 budget. You can see revenues. We still have a monitor out. Revenues, we propose a slight increase in revenues over the 2 years. One of the things that we're showing this year is a plateauing of airline-related revenues because of the continued pilot and crew shortage. Allegiant has, I think, 5 new aircraft coming this year. Some are destined for Punta Gorda, but if they don't get crews, they won't be flying new flights. So they're still telling us a 4 to 5% increase this year, but we're just not seeing it in our preliminary schedules that we've received from them. So looking at about a $22 million operating revenues, and go to the next slide, and you can see about an $18 million in expenses. So it's a $3.3 million operating gain. That's going to be less than we have seen in the past when it comes to a percentage gain, but obviously you can't make 15-17% every year. It's still a healthy margin. We're increasing a lot of our expenses. Salaries and wages are going up 5% for raise, cost of living raise for employees. There's still a 5% bonus potential in there, and that's based on our operating gain. So that'll be paid out if we make the requirements that are set forth in our policy. Going through everything else, if you look, insurance, another big one going up about $250,000, and that's an estimate. We'll probably see a little bit more in that, and computer maintenance supplies. It's really not a big jump, 18.8 from 17.1, but you can see there's a few things going up. The majority of it's in those top three, which are salaries, payroll, taxes and retirement, and personnel expenses, and then insurance. And then below the line, non-operating, question?
No, I was going to say, if any board members have a question.
Yeah, please jump in.
Ask them now, 'cause
With the insurance, is that health insurance, is it property liability?
That's property liability, yeah. The health insurance is included in the payroll, personnel expenses. And I don't think we received a large increase in health insurance this year. That's been pretty flat.
Was it just from all the claims related to the hurricane?
Yeah, Florida property insurance has seen a huge jump. We're expecting about a 35% increase. Considering we were at about $100,000 a year when I started, now we're almost $1 million a year for health property insurance. Below the line, PFCs, CFCs, one of the big things you'll notice, which is increasing greatly, is interest on our money in the bank. We have negotiated a 5% return with the bank right now, so it's nice to be getting that money without really having to do anything.
Is our cash spread around more than one bank?
No, it's one bank, but it's in a government secured account. Yeah. We have to do it that way. I mean, we don't have to have it in one bank, but we have to have it in secure. It has to be in a secured. So, all right. And here's the rest of the fun stuff. Depreciation. Every time we build a new building, we have to start depreciating it. I argue with that all the time, but it doesn't get me anywhere. But at the end of the day, it's about a $56 million budget total with capital expenditures. And we're going to go through how all that works out. So let's get into the graphs. This is the exciting part for everybody, the graphs. Just show we're pumping about 13 million gallons a year in fuel. About 93% of that goes into our friends at Allegiant. And then Jet A retail sales and avgas is a very small portion of our total gas or fuel pumped. So, next slide. So this is our projected total sales and gross profit off of Jet A and avgas. And just note, avgas is for the majority of our general aviation pilots, with the combination of self-serve and truck, and the majority of it being off self-serve. We're profiting, and that profit doesn't include the cost of trucks, the cost of maintenance, the cost of tanks, the electricity. We're making $190,000, almost $191,000 a year. I will tell you the price to move the tank over, excluding moving it, just preparing the site and getting FP&L power to it and installing a second avgas self-serve is considerably more than that number. I think at some point we're going to have to look at making a little bit more on avgas just to cover our costs. But right now we're okay. And that's set in our rates and charges, and if we do anything, we'll bring back that to the board at a future date. But I talked to a lot of airlines. I was talking to Sheltair at FAC, and they're all trying, or airports, and they're all trying to get a little bit more out of the avgas because sales are slowing and the costs are increasing to maintain the systems. And with the potential of the no lead and the potential requirement that we have two systems, a leaded and an unleaded, that would double our costs and maintenance. Now, right now in the reauthorization, there's conflicting language on whether we have to have two systems, so we'll see how that all works out.
What's demand are you hearing for what most people refer to as avgas?
It's
auto gas.
Considerably low. Oh, you mean MoGas?
Yeah.
There's not a lot, especially with the new ethanol in the gas. You'd have to have a non-ethanol system. So we're not hearing a lot of demand for that. The demand, or the requirement, the federal requirement to get rid of lead is going to be the bigger issue.
And there are a lot of airplanes
That just won't be. I mean, high performance airplanes, high altitude piston engines just won't be able to run on. So go through emplanements a little, and you'll see why I said it's kind of flattening out. 911,768 is our projection for next year. Our projection for the end of this year is 98, down about 50,000 from our previous year. Allegiance told us that that's not going to be normal. They're asking for more gates. They're asking for more parking. So I think their plan is to position 2 more aircraft here. They just have to get over the pilot situation and the crew situation. And they're in pilot negotiations with their union. So I think once that's finalized, they'll be able to bring more pilots on.
Are they going to fly to more cities than they do right now?
I mean, their plan is to fly to more cities and to increase frequency to the higher cities.
Awesome. Well, that's good.
There's a good chance if what you're saying comes to fruition, you'll probably break 1 million.
I think so.
On emplanements.
I think so.
From what I'm seeing.
Yeah. So,
speaking of that, there's an interesting fact out there that the public should be made aware of. Currently in the United States, there are 256, is it, Kylie, or 257 airports that have airline service. That's all there are in the whole United States. At one time, it used to be like 330 or something. And with the ACI, which is the Airport Council International North America, just did a ranking of airports based on passenger emplanements. And believe it or not, this airport ranks 108 out of the 256 or 7 airports.
I think it's almost 400 if you count the non-hubs. Small hubs and above, that's the number you're talking. And that we went down from 99. And we're 330th worldwide.
So the activity, everybody thinks every city has an airport and 12 airlines serving them, but that's not factual.
We live in Florida, and there's an airport every 50 miles. Most states don't have that. We're the only state in the nation with 4 large hub airports. We're the only state in the nation with multiple medium hub airports and a lot of small hub airports. So it's a great state to be in because everyone wants to get here.
That's World War II is what put all these airports on the map. There's some good books out there.
Plus it doesn't snow.
What's that?
It doesn't snow here.
All right.
You can fly more.
Just a projection. You can see it pretty much follows last year's. We're seeing a little slowdown in December and January. I honestly think that's not going to come to fruition. I think they'll put some more flights in here. It's just that's their preliminary schedule. All right, next slide. Get into our revenue streams. Our larger streams this year continues to be parking. So we're projecting about a $4.5 million from parking. I would like to consider raising our long-term rates $1 an hour. We're at 11, which is the lowest around. with the exception of RSW, who's also at 11, but my understanding is they are increasing theirs too. I'd like to go to 12 to put some more money in our parking reserve so we can add a new cell phone lot up front and then and finish the red lot out and build another 1,000 spaces in there. We'll go through the reserves in a minute, so you'll see where we are, but this is, you know, we wanted to show this is not reflected in the budget, but it's just something I'd like to, you know, talk to the board about.
You'll need board action to increase it.
We will. We would, and so that's why I'm just showing you what the increase would be.
Have you,
Go ahead, excuse me.
oh, thank you. Have you considered doing sort of like a tiered system? I just flew in and out of the St. Pete Clearwater Airport and had to park at this.
What?
Trust me, I would have much rather flown out of here. Get me the flight to Plattsburgh back.
Would you like to strike that?
But it's, they have some, you know, way off-site parking lot that's like $8 a day, and we ended up there just because it was full.
Usually a private operator.
Yeah, they're a private operator, and they rent lots everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we went to remote parking, we would have to have a lower. Fortunately for us, most of our parking is pretty close. St. Pete doesn't have the ability to build any more parking. That's where they're going vertical.
Yeah.
But
So do you want us to consider that in this budget process, the dollar increase?
I'm not presenting that right now. If we did, if the board says they would consider it, we would modify the budget and bring it back to you next month. Just information. This is what it would do. That, you know, as when the last increase we had, every bit of that increase goes into a reserve fund for parking lot construction, and so we're looking at increasing that. We are, you know, pretty reasonable when it comes to parking in the area, but the cost of building a spot has gone from about $2,000 a spot to $5,000. And, you know, that's not just pavement and curbing and lighting, that's landscape requirements, irrigation requirements, just everything that goes into building. So rental car income, 2022 was a great year, and we tried to figure it out because our rental car leasing was way down, the number of cars they rented, but the cost, the price that they charged was through the roof. And that was just part of the economics at the time. They had gotten rid of so many cars, so they increased the cost. And we made a lot of money on our model that year. 2023 went back to normal. So we have signed a new agreement with all the rental car companies this year. We negotiated a little more traditional agreement where they rent space, they rent parking spots, they pay a MAG, a minimum annual guarantee. So we're looking at a slight increase in our projected revenue.
What percentage are you getting on the contracts now?
16 and a half.
We were at 20.
We were at 20 flat, now we're at 16 and a half.
Plus
but
all the rest.
Plus all the rest. You know, we're going to get about the same amount of money per rental. It's just we have more guarantees. So in slow months, we get a little bit more money than. But all right, next slide. So this is kind of the breakdown per enplaned passenger. You can see through the months. In September is high because that's when we get our mags from the rental car companies. But you know, our average is 1444. We need to maintain 12 plus to continue making the model work. But auto parking and rental car, obviously the biggest two. Food and beverage and all the other concessions, as well as the grants we get from the TSA to pay for our law enforcement. And then
is there any revenue consideration in your numbers for the new restaurant in the GA terminal if it ever gets opened?
No, that would go all to the GA facility. So I think the rents are included in our revenue.
Where are they anyway? I haven't been there.
They have their permits.
It's in the county. We're in the final stages. They were supposed
responded to their comments and resubmitted 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So we're hoping any time now to have the permit.
Yeah.
When we need Stephen R. here, he's not here.
Tell him he can't get food at meetings until we have a restaurant.
So that is one
Somewhere that has free cookies.
free food, you got it.
So this is basically the same slide, just showing the revenue per in-plane passenger, including PFCs, CFCs, and entitlements, and excluding our costs. We're still trying to figure out why the graph says 538 is bigger than 650, but that's Excel. So Heather did not spend all night trying to figure that out. We decided we'd go without it. So our net revenue in 2024 per in-plane passenger, including our entitlements, our CFCs, our PFCs, is going to be about $1,871 after you discount the cost. Costs include everything you see in our budget under airline-related costs, which is our ops, our land side, our police, and then a portion of airfield costs, and then a portion of administration. So, operating revenues for this current year, estimated out to the end, about $20 million, $20.5 million. If you net out, is that fuel? Yeah, cost of goods, which is the cost of all the fuel we buy, $17 million, $17.5 million. 70% comes from the airline-related parking, rental car, concessions, our industrial park leases, hangars and tie downs is about 6%, and then, everything else, fuel sales, miscellaneous, then avgas, so we have jet, and then you can see how it breaks down. Next year, in 2024, it looks exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the industrial park leases have gone up 1%, and that's because of the Speedway lease changing hands and going to a fair market value lease. Also, we have the lease with FEMA in there, which will run throughout next year, I believe. And then, we're continuing to get a lot of interest on the Air Center side. We'll be bringing another lease to you guys next month for another hangar. And so I think there's a lot of real potential to increase the hangar rentals, but they're going to be land leases, so they're not quite as profitable as a building lease. But things are looking good. Total revenue is about $22 million, or a little over $22 million.
Are you getting much interest from folks who would like to lease at the airport, but they don't want to go through the hassle of building? Like, are you getting a lot of inquiries relating to that?
I think if we had a spec building, we would have interest. I've talked to a lot of commercial builders, and there's just no return right now.
Yeah, now's not the time.
Yeah. No one wants to root for a recession, but I'd love for construction prices to come down. And with the cash in the bank, then that would be the time to jump on the potential building. Last time that happened, we had no money, but a lot of plans.
The option is out there, like Ms. Parrish mentioned, they lease the land and build it themselves. And, we end up with the building normally 30 years later. But the hangar investments are not the greatest in the world. It takes you more than 30 years to get your money back. Right. And at that point in time, the building's trashed. So, yeah, but you still have to service that demand on an airport.
You have to service the demand, and I was just on a panel with the Chief Development Officer for Sheltair, the CEO at Jacksonville, the CEO at MCO, and Jax owns runs three small general aviation airports. MCO has one. And Shelter makes their money building hangars, and they all said they cannot build T-hangars right now. There is no return. Their boards wouldn't let them. They won't even suggest it. So it's a tough market. We built our last set of T-hangars in 2005 for $42,000 a unit. These are over 150.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so.
You know, if you look at our hangar rent structure, we're very competitive, you know.
We're competitive with other airports. We're not competitive with the private sector. So. Expenses for the year, this is the current year projected out to the end of the year. Net expenses without fuel, $14,300,000. As always, personnel is the biggest part of that pie. And then airline-related expenses, and then you go over to repairs and maintenance, and that's just keeping the airport running. Any questions on that? We'll go to next year, and you can't even tell the pie changed. Very similar. I mean, where total expenses go up, but that's offset by our total revenues as well. Personnel, like I said, it's a 5% increase, but the same part of the pie, 57%. We do have a few new positions budgeted. We will, we always budget positions so we can make sure we have it in there. We often don't fill all those throughout the year or fill them at some time later in the year, but we budget them for the entire year. So there's some wiggle room in that number. We just want to make sure we can cover all the positions we need. There are also a lot of positions that are just unfilled right now, so we're not spending the money. We wish we could. Hiring janitorial and landside has been a difficult task over the last 2-3 years.
It's difficult. A lot of people don't want to work. And,
They don't want to work. They don't want to work outside. They don't want to clean toilets, and I can't blame them. So we're also competing with Cheney Brothers, with the airline here. Sunseeker's still 1,000 people short. You talk to every restaurant in town, they're all suffering to get people. So, we're not special. We're just part of the place we live and the time we live in. So we continue working. I think when you sit down and look at our benefits package compared to a private sector, it's pretty good. 24-year-olds don't care about retirement benefits.
but like we talked earlier, they need to see what that is. I don't know what the percentage of benefits is to salary here. Do you know offhand what it is?
It's pretty high at the lower, at the lower end. And we do have a fact sheet that we give to everybody, and we're working on making it colorful so that it just tracks the younger audience. FAC had a big session on finding and then retaining the millennials. And what's the next one? Z. So I didn't realize my generation was by far the smallest. I don't know what happened to the baby boomers. They didn't have
we're
any
dying.
kids.
That's what's happening.
Well, yeah, you guys are dying, but the Gen Xers are just, they're small. There's not a lot of us in the workforce total. There just weren't as many. So I think it's 3 years from now, the millennials will be the largest portion of the workforce. So,
has there been any consideration on the lower, the positions you're having difficulty filling, like the janitors and all that kind of stuff, about bumping the starting wage up to attract them? For a few dollars, you might get some people to work. And I know personnel expenses are, like you see, 57% of our budget.
With the number of people that we need to work, where are they going to live right now?
Well, that's, there's a lot of factors. If we increase starting salary for landside, then we have to up airside. When you up airside, then you have to do everybody in there because it's a cascading effect. But yes, we have looked at it. We have increased the starting salary. And the state's, going to a $15 minimum wage in a couple of years. We're trying to stay well ahead of that so that we have that built into our expenses. So we have increased starting salaries. We have increased last year we did a couple of small raises, or major raises really, as well as a large raise at the end, a COLA raise, and we're looking at another pretty large raise this year. But it's getting better. I will say it's getting better. It's getting easier to hire. It's getting easier to find people. I think more people are coming back into the workforce. We're seeing more applicants for jobs. They don't all show up for interviews, but the last few jobs we've had out, I mean, we've had 40 or 50 applicants, so it's getting better.
Wow.
So to go into our internal reserves, I just call them internal because we don't have any mandated reserves because of any loans or anything. So these are just money that we put in different folders. Our NAV reserves we keep consistent, and I don't like it, that's $200,000, $250,000. So if we use it, we put it back. Our parking lot reserves, this is the money that we set aside from the increase last time. We're approaching, or will be at the end of next year, at about $3.75 million. That is 1,000 spaces, if that. So keep that in mind. And we are probably going to look at going out for a new parking lot equipment in the next year. Our contracts are coming up. And we're seeing a shift in the nation to some more updated equipment, and I think we could get a better deal. But we'll go out and bring that back. But that'll.
Are we leasing that stuff now?
We own it. Yeah, but it's proprietary. So. Yeah. T-hanger reserves. That's our projection for next year. We do have a couple of projects. To do some updates to the T-hangers, fixing some rust, and then solving the rust issue by putting in gutters. Our building fund, it's getting pretty high. That's to replace roofs and carpeting and stuff like that. We've been really fortunate that about every 15 years we have a nice hurricane and get all new roofs. Yeah, I would rather be pulling the money out of reserves than dealing with this, but we're...
If in fact we get another hurricane and we got to come up with a couple of $1 million, our cost, or whatever the number is, you can pull that money from any of these reserves.
We can pull it from our general revenue.
Yeah.
These
are just kind of pots of money, but it's really one big pot.
Yeah, it's all in one big pot. That's why I call it, it's internal reserves. It's when you see the bank balance, these are all included in that. Our insurance escrow reserves, which we do set aside to pay our deductibles, obviously we wiped that out this year. We will be funding that with capital from this year's budget, or for revenue from next year's budget, as well as any repayments from FEMA that come to cover our deductibles. So that may inch up to back where it used to be.
And where do we stand on repayment of the loans?
Our SIB loan?
Yeah.
Or?
Are they all done?
No, we have.
One, and we'll
Yeah.
probably pay it off this year or next.
Yeah.
And then we don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah, we did,
We made a big payment not too long ago, didn't
we make a payment every year about this time.
Paid off the first SIV loan last year.
And then we did apply, and if we get approved for another SIB loan. SIB loans are great, they're very low interest, but it's for the terminal? Yeah, for the terminal expansion. We applied for our share of it through the loan. So we'll see. They called us and asked us to apply, so we put in for it. When the FAA or that DOT asks you to apply for a loan, you do it. So the rest are things we kind of have capped at a certain amount, contaminated and pollutant reserves. Those of you who have been on the board for a long time know that we were dealing with 2 or 3 contaminated sites for years. It was costing us $30,000, $40,000 a year to monitor and maintain. We have closed out all of our spills. We don't have any active spill sites on the airport, and we're going to keep it that way. And if I have anything to do with it. So that we've capped the amount that we put in there, and I think we're fine. And then we have a very small non-catastrophic reserve fund. So projects, 2023 projects, these are the ones you guys have been seeing for a long time. Working on about almost $20 million in projects this year. And you can go through how it's broken down. About $6 million of that has come from our reserves. That is, a lot of that is the hangars we've been building. And then FAA is that's part of the taxiway D rehab and finishing up 422. DOT also, taxiway D and 422, the majority of it, as well as our PFC funds. And then the OTA from TSA is the design of the baggage handling system that is going to go into construction very shortly. Any questions? My watch says I need to get up and walk around, so we gotta finish this meeting. This is 2024 projects. Obviously, you see the biggest one is the baggage handling system. Phase 1 and phase 1 is of the terminal expansion is the inline baggage system. The majority of that is coming from the TSA reimbursement as well as 50-50 with the state. At the end of the day, it'll be 50-50 between us and them, and our money is coming from PFCs. And we're also working on the Perimeter Road Phase 2, and then the rental car facility. And we're still working it out with the insurance company. That number is going to go up, potentially, but it'll be covered significantly by insurance proceeds. So.
Replacement of 207, is that in this year's budget or?
Yes.
207.
Yeah, so 207's the building.
North of the rent-a-cars?
Yeah, the rental car facility across from that we're moving them. So that is in here, that's at the top.
What is the ARF vehicle?
You don't. Aircraft rescue and firefighting. It's one of those big green fire trucks.
Right.
So
We have to replace it with a brand new one.
every 15 years we get to buy a new one.
It's 1.5 million?
Probably not, probably more. That's a good, yeah.
That's astounding.
Well, what's more astounding is right now we're required by the FAA to spray a fluorine-free or a PFAS, which is a fluorine foam, which is now a hazardous chemical.
Yes.
If they, and they were required by Congress to come out with a fluorine-free foam by the end of 2020, it's now 2024, and they're almost there. If they come out with that, they don't know if our current equipment will be able to use it.
Oh, great.
So we may have to replace both trucks. They don't know if the current equipment can be adapted, and when they come out with multiple foams, they don't know if the current equipment could spray one or the other. So
It's an interesting situation. Those of you that you may have seen some of the ads by law firms that are doing lawsuits for people that were exposed to AFFF, and if you got cancer and all that kind of stuff. And,
well, the great thing about
there's nothing.
this dispute is yes, the manufacturers have agreed that there may be some liability, and I think they've already put a couple of $2 billion aside for it.
Whoa.
It's also in nonstick coating, it's in styrofoam, it's in every bag you get from
Great.
the grocery store, it's in every bag you get from fast food. It's not an airport issue, it's an industry issue that's out there everywhere. But of course, we have no choice. If I could replace the foam today, I would. I don't want this on the airport, but I have no choice but to use it. And that's why airports have been out there just screaming that we can't be held liable for using it when the federal government told us we had to. So, don't have a choice. So, yes, we're buying a $1.5 million truck that may be obsolete.
So does the 1.5 million, does that include all the required equipment that's going
Unbelievable.
to be on there? Or
Yes.
is it just the vehicle?
No, that's
Okay, it's
everything
fully
that's
spec'd out.
required, yeah.
Okay.
Except for the people, it's fully spec'd.
But how can you say you don't have a choice when it's so hazardous? Hazardous.
We don't have a choice. I mean, it's required to have airline service. Every airport in the nation has to have a truck that sprays that foam.
That blows my mind. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's outrageous.
In practice.
Oh, no, so,
Only if you actually need it for aircraft.
yeah,
Well, yeah, when there's a situation, yeah.
so
I'd
we,
rather take my
They
chances
used
with the
to,
cancer
they used to
than the
spray
fire.
in practice is where all these people.
yeah,
allegedly
so
got, but now they don't do
the
that.
sites that are really, where the contamination is seen is in the training facilities and in the areas where you used to go out and spray your truck. Now, we have a bypass system, so they can show that it works, but it bypasses and goes back into the tank. So it's something we bought from E1, the truck supplier that hooks in at the end of the system, right where it injects into the spray, that circulates it around, so they can see that it would have made it, but we don't want to spray it. I can tell you the airport has never sprayed AFFF.
It used to be just sprayed almost randomly everywhere. In
Yeah.
practice, you want to check your truck runs, so they would just go out and spray it.
Yeah.
But now these bypass systems prevent that.
Yeah, so there's, the problem is, if we went and tested 20 miles off the airport, you're going to have PFAS in the water. And they're testing to parts per billion. But is it from the landfill? Is it from, we don't know. So, and you can't have a point source because it's so prevalent.
Is there any chance that we could get like a waiver to say, we want to buy this new truck, but we want to wait until the new spray foam is out? Can you give us a year?
So we're not required to buy a new truck. We can buy a new truck every 15 years. Our existing truck is starting to have maintenance issues, so every 15, it used to be 10 and they've extended it to 15 because honestly the trucks have gotten a lot better. I'm going to push this as far as we can. I mean, they're telling
It
us.
can't have high mileage. It's just the part.
No, but they do run every
It's
day,
the
and it's
idle
high
and idle
hours.
time.
And we get 90% on those.
Yeah, so
We
it's
get
90% covered
of
by,
costs is covered
Okay.
by grants.
you know,
Got it.
and then the other 10% is covered by PFCs, which come from the airline,
That's not
so.
a reason to buy a truck because we get money from somewhere else, but like I say, they're starting to fall apart.
Where do the old trucks go?
To an old truck farm. If you drive up I-95, there is a place in South Carolina that rents them, sells them, and leases them, and they're all parked along the side of the road. We're probably going to work out a deal with the county. You know, I'd bring it back to the board where we donate our truck to them to use at the firefighting training facility, with the caveat that they maintain it so that if we ever need it because of repairs or an accident, that it's a standby
If the fire
truck. So,
goes out of service, you
yeah,
can drag it
bring that
back
one
in.
back. All right, next slide. So, you know, this is the one I always keep an eye on. Talk to you about the Heather and James year starting in 2006. Things have gotten much, much better. We were not covering costs with revenue, operating expenses with revenue until that time. And as you can see, we continue to increase revenues and increase expenses, and the delta between the two has stayed fairly consistent, with the exception of 19, 20, and 21, where we suffered through the pandemic and our expenses stayed the same, but our revenues came tumbling down.
How'd they stay afloat back there in 2001 through 2006? Were you here then?
I was their consultant, so I can't tell you what they did.
Okay, that's why it went down.
Yeah, so when they stopped paying my consultant fees,
When did we lose our taxing authority? I don't know if we ever used it.
it was in the,
think so.
It was in
the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of that discrepancy in revenue is accounting. We always covered, but at the end of the day, when you get to the final numbers, things have changed. So
You had enough cash flow back in then that
we did. They always cash flowed, and they went into reserves a few years, especially with you know, some of the hurricane
in 04,
issues
yeah.
in '04. Total operating revenues continue to be on the upswing, which is, you know, interesting, but total operating expenses also go up. So, you know, we've gone from, in 2003, a $2 million a year operation revenues to a $22 million a year operation revenues. And when you add projects onto that, $50+ million a year operation. So it's been a big swing. I will, if we had employee count by year, you would probably see the employee count has not significantly increased. But, you know, that's one thing we look at every year. We are trying to maintain our budget model, but also keep higher standards with terminal cleanliness, with safety, and all the other things that go along with operating a public facility. So. Next slide. It goes back to the budget. If there's any questions, we can dig into things. If not, I would welcome all of you on the board to contact Heather and I if you have any specific questions or would like to come in and sit down and get an in-depth review of the budget. Yeah.
you know, Mr. Hurston isn't here, but he's making arrangements to sit down with Mr. Parrish and go through all this.
So just so everybody knows, we have a budget hearing with our next meeting. So that'll be the first presentation of the budget. And then 4 weeks later, we'll have our final budget hearing. We can make changes from now until you guys approve the preliminary budget at the next meeting. So I welcome all of you to call Kelly, call myself, call Heather, set up a time to come in. We can put it up on the big screen. It's a little easier to see. And then, you know, when you're looking at this on the big screen, we can click on fuel and oil sales and it'll show you the breakout. We can click on industrial park leases and it shows you the breakout. So it's a lot of exciting stuff.
Any further questions right now? If not, I'll adjourn this.
We don't have a second. Previously you've had it, so I just.
We don't have any public comments.
These,
Unless, I'm asking if anybody wants to.
all of this information's on the website if anyone wants to look at it. So if anybody in the public has any questions, they can contact myself, Kaylee, or Heather, and we can get them whatever they need. So, all right.
Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the workshop on the budget.
All right. And if you could give Kelly
5 minutes.
a few minutes to close out one and open another recording,
Yeah.
and then we issue.
Okay, I'd like to call order the emergency meeting of the Charlotte County Airport Authority. We'll need to have an official roll call. Kelly, again.
Mr. Andrews?
Here.
Mrs. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Carr?
Present.
Mr. Hansick?
Here.
Mr. Parrish?
Here?
Mrs. Coppola? Here. Thank you.
Okay, as usual, we follow the format of agenda. If anyone wishes to address the board concerning the agenda item, please come forward, identify yourself. Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Mr. Parrish. There's a public transportation grant agreement from the Florida Department of Transportation.
So we have been working with the TSA and our designers for the last, 2 years on the baggage handling system. We put it out to bid. We have selected a low bidder, and we went to the DOT to fund 50% of the non-federal share, which is our share. This grant kind of gets us pregnant. This was leftover money from this year's budget. They will then, in subsequent years, fund the additional monies to get us to 50%. The problem with the DOT's methods is you can't start anything until you get this in place. So we've been working with Tallahassee for the last 2 months. Chad and I have made multiple trips up there, talking to the CIS management. They're going through a lot of transition, so there's a lot of new staff, but we were very fortunate that they found this money for us, so we need to quickly get this grant back to them. So as with DOT grants, the board has to accept them and have a resolution accepting them. So our recommendation is the board accept the grant agreement in the amount of $301,449, adopt resolution 2023-05, and allow me to execute the grant.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to accept Florida Department of Transportation grant.
Oh, go ahead.
You know,
I make a motion that the board accepts the DOT Public Transportation Grant Agreement in the amount of $301,449, adopt Resolution 2023-05, and the CEO executes the FDOT Public Transportation Grant Agreement as presented.
need a second. Okay. Got a motion and a second to accept the defined Florida Department of Transportation Public Transportation Grant Agreement. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Now, anybody else want to talk anything before I adjourn? Meeting adjourned.